My first discovery using these knee pads for the first time is that they'd probably be easier to install with the garment off. I don't really have time to drop trowel right now, so I'll wedge them in here, because if you've never installed a luxury vinyl plank flooring system, you might not want knee pads in the beginning, but you'll need them by the end. So let me wrestle this in here, and we'll get our video started. How to install luxury vinyl plank in a basement remodel. Step 1, layout. I've set this tape up. That goes all the way behind you to 20 feet. A little detail here is that I extend the tape to 19'9" and use the body of the tape as a stop, knowing that it's 3 inches. So the end of the tape, which is over here, is 20 feet away from that wall. So now I use a second tape. Oh, pillowy knees! I use a second tape to measure to my far wall. And what I want is for this measurement, which is 159.5, to be the same when I set this system up over there. 159.5 is what I'm looking for. And 159.5 is what I got. So we're parallel. That means when we go all the way across this room with LVP, we're not going to end up with sliver cuts on that end. So 4 of these gives me a nice round number of about 30.25. I multiply 30.25 to get a mark here, which I've already marked on the floor at 121. And that shows me that when I round this corner, I don't have a sliver cut here. A rule of thumb for floors, avoid sliver cuts when you can. Tile, wood, whatever. So I know I have a good healthy chunk to get around this corner. Reason number 999 why I build my carts for basement remodeling is because there's always something that has to move. These lumps were pretty gnarly. I think they were old glue. Anyway, the bet I'm trying to hedge here is creating a void between the bottom of my plank and the top of my floor. Overkill? Maybe. I'd rather be safe than sorry, because once it's in, it's in. This is me communicating with my future self. You can see that blue tape behind me. That signifies rough layout for the ceiling lighting, which the electrician and I did, maybe a month before this? Anyway, I don't want to lose that work, so I'm leaving myself a little trail of breadcrumbs here with measurements so that I can transfer those pieces of blue tape up to the underlayment and through the underlayment onto the floor. Speaking of underlayment, I don't install LVP every day, and what reading the instructions told me is there's a left and a right, and I have to peel some backing off an adhesive strip, and now instead of having to figure that out in real time, I just read the instructions. Here's a cutting sequence I find for cutting rolled goods easier. Go a little past my mark. I come back reasonably straight. Then with a sharp blade, I take and make one cut away from the roll. Then, because I'm reasonably straight, I can eyeball the edge of the roll and make the rest of my cut without the knife hanging up. Underlayment is down in the section we can reasonably complete today. So now what I'm doing is I'm opening boxes and I'm intermingling the pieces such that if there's a repeating pattern or something like that, it gets randomized in my selection of inventory. So as I go through the day, I'll pick from different boxes, different stacks, and we'll have a nice random pattern. Luxury vinyl planks have a left, a right, a front, and a back, and they looked close enough like each other that it only took me roughly 100 of these to get it right the first time, every time. Also, the underlayment is serving a couple of purposes here too I wanted to explain. First, it's a thermal break, so the room will be easier to condition. It's a vapor barrier, and it hedges bets against voids showing up in the finished floor so that it all feels nice and solid. My pattern here in the offsets is starting to get a little too close for my liking, and I know the instructions state clearly they want 12-inch pieces or better to start out these runs, and I understand why, but I would rather alter this pattern while I can. So I've taken a real shorty, I'm going to connect it to a full-length piece using the Witchcraft Juju. That clicked together nicely, essentially making one piece. And I'll install it as such so I can hopscotch this laddering pattern here. Quick update on these knee pads. I wanted to like them. The idea seemed to work, but as soon as I put them on, I could barely get them in here. Conversely, I could barely get them out at the end of the day. Furthermore, as my pants stretched, I was on kneecaps by the end of the day, so it's back to these old terrible things that mostly work. Ugh! What I learned watching modern builds on YouTube, very watchable channel by the way, he suggested doing this. And that not only locks this piece to this piece, but it pushes the floor planks together. Is that in the instructions? No! But I got it on his channel. That was pretty cool, so thank you. The tool trick works north and south and east and west. Sometimes the flooring isn't nested correctly, only by a little bit, and you have to manage this corner down. I took to kneeling on the pieces as we went. This one closed up nice and tight. So the way I like to notch things whenever possible is I mark them instead of measure. Getting a tape measure all in here and registering it to this and that. Instead, and we also have a gap down here, so I don't need to be right on. I put it where the board will go, put the flat side of the pencil on the obstruction. This will mark that side of the notch, and this will mark this side of the notch. Then, without having to measure anything, I just connect the dots and make the cut. And it goes like that pretty much all the way through to final details. Do note, however, the blue tape on the bottom of the tool. Luxury vinyl plank is durable, but I'll tell you what, you can also scratch it, and it's hard to see the scratches. A lot of whacking and thwacking. Note the earplugs in my ears. These are my favorite earplugs, by the way, and I needed them. They're called Eros. I got them at Lowe's. There I am managing that corner down, and the piece now slots in with me kneeling on it. A few short chops when I'm up against an obstruction. I'm transferring the marks up to show the electric, and now we're on to the threshold. The threshold instructions call for 2 small hollow wall anchors to hold this piece of threshold base down. You'll see in a minute where I struggle to get that threshold capping all the way seated. I eventually did, but I would use more and better anchors next time. Got to use all my tricks, John.
Go back into the Flintstone era.
Set a little dimple so the bit has somewhere to ride in. If you switch up to rotary hammer from hammer drill, you are never going to find your hammer drill again.
Meaning you won't want to go back to the other drill?
Right.
Yeah.
Hammer drills are... and they're not as powerful. Let's get that in there. That in there. The high side. In there like swimwear.
How about the middle? I see it up on here. Yeah.
This is a good example of hollows in the floor telegraphing themselves through an LVP system. Here there's one right in the middle of the threshold, of course, and it fought me from engaging the threshold with its base strip. I got it! It looked great when I left, but it was a little bit of a hassle. This section of the video isn't really intended to be a whole primer on base molding, but in an LVP system, you're going to need to do quarter round or something to cover the edges. For base, I like to use a 22.5 degree scarf joint, and for corners, I like to trace them. By the way, LVP is murder on carbide. We'll pop a few brads in here, and this is all part of the larger video series of basement remodeling, where the finishes are, you can paint them, but you don't have to.